rise above the static, dissecting issues diplomatic. With mics in hand, they brave the storm of clashing views and norms transform. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining lights on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they pause the spinning and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view.
All right, everybody. This is the second, new style video, audio hybrid of the conversation. Okay, so just like a few logistical details. Thank you for the couple of you, or actually a lot of you did the 5 stars. That's great. Some of you left positive reviews on Apple or wherever you subscribe. That we're also on YouTube. And YouTube is where the video was last week, and I'm going to try to, basically figure it out with the editor to make it easier to do that also on the Substack. But one thing is, in terms of publicizing the conversation, we have had problems. I brought this up before. The X site, Twitter, erstwhile Twitter. X is just not a good name to talk about something as X. It has like some negative associations with Gen X people, keep it PG, but you know what I'm trying to say though? It's like, I saw him on X. Okay. It's like,
okay, let me say this, Razib. Did you see the video of them catching the booster as it landed, that giant crane?
Yeah.
You can call it Elon. In my opinion, Elon could call it whatever he wants. If he wants to.
All right. Okay. For Elon, we will turn the world upside down. Okay. I'm not gonna go gay though, but not out there.
No. I don't think he's.
Yeah. Okay. That's the last. Yeah, that's the last frontier that we're not gonna do. All right. So,
but yeah.
Yeah, those of you, we know there's some prominent people who listen. I'm not snooping on you, but I see the downloads and stuff like that. Just like tell people about the conversation, have them check it out. Even if you don't pay, we provide a lot of commentary that is free. I mean, usually most of our free episodes are about an hour, and then we do another 30 minutes. So I think it's like good content, and people have been enjoying it so far. I know, we're going to be losing a listener. She is not going to be listening to this, but she doesn't want to know who's going to win the election, supposedly. I don't know how that's going to work. Good luck. So, she will not be listening to this until after the election. So, hey, I hope you, figured out what you needed to figure out to block this out. But I bet you failed, and I won the bet. But in any case, not rubbing it in. Okay. So yeah, those are the logistics of this. We're gonna put it on Twitter, and maybe I'll make a Facebook, whatever. But social media is just not the same as it was. Maybe I will mention it on my other podcast and podcasts I get. Word of mouth, the Substack network is helping. We think we're producing some good content. I do have to say, you got to be hustle and nimble here when you can do current events. So speaking of podcasts, my friend Lee Fong and Leighton Woodhouse have started a podcast, and they're going to be talking about Kamala, which we were going to talk about as well. I'm just seeing everyone talking about the same stuff, and I think what we're going to have to. Yeah, what we're going to have to do though is figure out different angles. I think in the paywall, we're going to be talking about a controversial figure that people read but don't name. So I might have some insights there that other people that you wouldn't find in the mainstream media. I might. So just putting that out there. For those of you who are never going to listen to the paywall. And by the way, just to be clear, I've said this before. Josiah and I, we kind of have an implicit commitment, not implicit, explicit. We're going to do this for a year. We're doing this for 50, and I think we're going to do it longer. I'll give you guys audience a preview. I think we're doing well. We're getting some support out there. Appreciate that, but the trajectory is looking good. We're gonna do this. We'll do this for a year, and we're gonna try to keep it simple. We're making a promise to those of you who pay. You're not paying for something that other people will get free. We're gonna have a lot of free content and we're gonna have paid content we just keep locked up. This is how it is. This is how it is. It'll keep it simple. That's my general philosophy with my other Substack, unsupervised learning. Don't do like all these complicated, like setups where you do discriminatory, not discriminatory, but price discrimination, stuff like that. We get that, but look, we're just having fun. We're just talking, and we don't want to, make this into a whole operation. We don't want to Mr. Beast. We don't want to Mr. Beastify it. Some of you know that Mr. Beast has a dossier on like how long they have to watch before you know that they're stuck, and where you have to have like the big goofy smile and all these things. We don't do that. We just keep it all real and simple, and we think that that's good content, good product for you. And it's definitely easy on us, and it also makes it so that this isn't. I don't know. I mean, it's not an onerous like I gotta talk to Josiah and like figure out like all these it's not like acrobatics and he's my like acrobatics partner or something like that. We're just being natural here, So a lot of people think that smoking weed is natural and part of Africa. Apparently, Kamala Harris thinks it's part of African American culture, just as like part of her Jamaican American heritage.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of stuff that's been happening. We'll talk about Kamala Harris and the campaign, the state of the race. The first thing is like I'm just gonna ask straight up. There's all this stuff about like, oh, we're gonna give loan forgiveness to black men and also maybe other people. All of this like racial targeting stuff. Okay, it's illegal to do it explicitly. So everything is that I assume that they're talking about, which they're not going to do mostly if they even get elected, is not going to be race targeted anyway. They just think it'll have a disparate impact, correct? Like from a lawyer's perspective.
Well, I mean, you would think that. In fact, they have the Biden-Harris administration has done a bunch of this race explicit stuff. You might recall early in the administration, they tried to do some like special programs for black farmers. And recently, I think the Treasury Department had some like special loans for like black and brown, whatever. So it is illegal. If someone sues them, I think they have a good chance to win in court, on the argument that you can't discriminate based on race. But that hasn't stopped them from trying to go ahead. And sometimes they get away with it just because no one sues. It's not like you have to be. You or I couldn't sue for the program. You would like with the agriculture thing, you have to be a white farmer who would otherwise be eligible for the program, but not, because you're not black. That's what you need. Is
it that you have to? Is the term you have to have standing?
Correct. Yeah, you have to have standing. So
I know that from TV shows.
Okay. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I mean, I would not. Like you would think they would want to be smart about it and do stuff that's like got disparate impact or whatever, but that isn't that's a formally race blind. But that's not the way they've been doing it up until now. Even though they're hurting themselves. So we will, we'll have to see. I think it's more indicative. I would say, the Kamala Harris, the campaign, it did come out with this like list of policies for black men. I think it was specifically black men, and two of them were legal recreational weed, marijuana, and the other one was like protecting crypto investments, which I don't exactly even know what that means. It seems like it sort of seemed like it was thrown together, like they needed to come up with an agenda for black men. And so they came up with a bunch of stuff that mostly they probably already wanted to do anyway and just framed it that way. It got, I think it got some pushback in terms of like, is this how you think you want to appeal to like black men, is weed and crypto?
Yeah.
And then there was also something about like a new like forgivable business loans, akin, I think, to like the PPP program from COVID.
Well, because black folks aren't good at business. No, I don't know. It's like, right. I you know what I'm trying to say? Like the implication of what you're saying about like we're going to legalize marijuana, we're going to forgive your loans. It's weird.
Honest, I have to say, to be honest, when I first looked at the list, I had to double check because it sort of seemed like a racist parody of what the agenda would be. In particular, like there was abuse of the PPP program where people said that they had businesses and got the money and then got it forgiven when they didn't really have any businesses. So, I think, so the political point, the broader political point is that the campaign does not seem to be doing very well with men in general, and then they are particularly worried, with like black men. But it's like they're worried about black men and also Hispanic men and also young men and also men without college degrees. It's all sorts of men, right? That's the kind of like big cleavage in the campaign is sex, where the gender gap, I suspect, is going to be. I mean, there's been a gender gap for a long time, but it's going to be really huge, I think, this time, particularly as you get like younger. And they don't really know, like they've tried different things to deal with it. I don't know if you saw the I'm a man ad. This is, I
This is
think,
the new guys for Kamala.
well, there was yeah. I
The
mean, there was
real guy, the fat guy,
Right.
the black guy, and the other real guy.
There were a couple of them, yeah, who seemed like they were. I mean, one of them was standing next to a horse. These are all actors, actually. They were mostly from this group called the Upright Citizens Brigade.
Upright citizens. Oh yeah. Okay.
So they're like actors. They all live in like they all live in cities. One of them I think has done like gay porn. I don't. I mean, whatever. But
He's a man. He's a man with a man's appetites.
yeah, right, yeah. So it was very, I mean, it was like kind of a, I would say the ad was very funny. They are comedians. I don't think it was funny in an intentional way, but it was basically them saying a bunch of like over the top stereotypical, like, I'm man enough to know, to drink bourbon. I'm mad enough to eat a rare steak. I'm mad enough to know what donuts I like, which, I mean, a child knows what donuts he likes, and then it's like, I'm man enough to support Kamala Harris for president, right? So they have a problem with men. They don't know how to fix it. They're kind of floundering a little bit on it. And they are also worried. And this is something so they're worried about like black support from like traditionally Democrat groups, which seem like, if you look at the polling, it's like it's below where it needs to be, and this is something that I think people often get confused about, right? Because Kamala Harris is going to win the black vote. She's going to win the black vote overwhelmingly. She's going to win black men, right? Super majority. I can guarantee that. But there's a big difference between whether you win for a Democrat, whether you win 90% of the black vote or 75%, right? Because normally it's always 90+% for the Democrat, right? I think the last time you had a Republican who won more than 15% of the black vote was Richard Nixon in 1960, right? So it's all, so any erosion in that, even a little bit, can be really bad for you, even if you're overwhelmingly win that demographic, right? And the same is true for Trump. In 2020, Trump actually improved his performance compared to 2016 with women, with minorities, right? Even with like white women. He only went down a little bit with white men, right? And people don't think about it this way because like he won white men like bigly, as he would say, but it went down a little bit, relative, okay? And that was enough to cost him the election. So something you could definitely see something like that happening with Kamala, where if she trails, on she's trailing where she was last time, or where Biden was. Youth vote, black vote, Hispanic vote. Even if she still wins those groups, which she will, that could be enough to cost her the election. So she's worried about that, but they don't really seem to have they haven't figured out a way to actually appeal to those groups to the way they need to, and they're kind of running out of time.
Yeah, just like while you were talking, I just decided to like ask ChatGPT question really quickly, and yeah, you're right. So in terms of the black vote, so Eisenhower won 39% in 1956, which is like totally inconceivable. It looks like Nixon won 32%.
Right.
In or about 30%, yeah, 32% and 60. The big inflection point is after the 1964 Civil Rights Act passed. You got a massive shift. 94% of the black vote in 1964 for Johnson. So that was a massive shift, like a 25-point shift in 4 years because of that particular legislation. Then after that, we basically seen like 85 to 93%. The high was Obama at 93%, and then it's kind of like trailed off to like high 80s or something since then.
Yeah.
And one thing that I want to note is it really matters not because of its popular vote, but the city of Detroit in Michigan, swing state, city of Philadelphia, lesser except Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania have a lot of black voters.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you have Atlanta, and yeah, Milwaukee. It used to be this is because we're old. Missouri used to be a swing state. Missouri actually voted with the winner every single time. I think up until it would be probably Obama. Obama in 2008, I
I
think.
think that's right.
Yeah, because then they swung. So like Missouri, Bush barely won Missouri actually in 2000, and so it was St. Louis was a big St. Louis and Kansas City were a big deal. So black voters are concentrated in these cities, and they counterbalance the rural suburbs and exurban areas in some of these swing states, and that is why it is important to focus because obviously, I mean in 2016, Hillary lost Pennsylvania and Michigan, and probably Wisconsin too, actually. But I mean, it was just like reduced black turnout in the cities. She won them overwhelmingly, but they didn't come out for her like they came out for Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, who was the first black president. So that's just how it is. I mean, obviously, Trump got like a little bit of the rural white vote up, but Hillary didn't even maintain the black vote under Obama. So I will say one thing about the demographic targeting. The Democratic establishment actually like they eat their own dog food, like in terms of these identity politics groups and how you appeal to. I mean, as a white male, and I am a male, though I'm not white. I am a person of color.
Yeah.
Just in case you're on audio, you know. um, you, I don't think that the marginal gettable. I mean, we're not necessarily gettable. Like we're not really part of that Kamala. Although I'm not a political person, so I should definitely be targeted as a independent. Um, but they're not really appealing. Okay, I don't know if this is true, but it's like okay, but I'm gonna say it, like a bunch of white women get in a room and they're like, "How do we appeal to the men?"
Right.
And then they kind of like, okay, well, men like I know they like rare steak.
Yeah.
Well, horses. What about horses? Cowboys,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing about that ad in particular is, so there was a bunch of stereotypically male coded stuff, lifting weights, horses, steak. But when it got to the actual like issues or substance, or like why would a man want to support Kamala, part of the ad, the things that they mentioned were abortion, IVF, letting kids read books in school, and it's fine to vote for a woman. So these are like not
Real men have the concerns of women in mind.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Whereas, like if you're so what I think there's two things. One is, and this is a problem that both the Democrats and the Republicans have, but I think the Democrats have this problem more, which is when they want to target black voters, they think, okay, well, what are like black specific issues, or if you want to target Hispanic voters, they think, okay, well, what are Hispanic, they think, okay, if you want to target Hispanic voters, you need to talk about, uh, DACA or immigration issues, right? If you want to target black voters, you talk about affirmative action, or if it's black men, apparently it's weed and crypto. Um, but the thing is, like, black voters are also, I mean, they're just voters, they're Americans. So if you ask black voters what their top concerns are, it's going to be inflation, it's going to be the economy, uh it's
It's gonna be the same thing.
same things. They're going to have on average slightly different views about it, perhaps, and there will be, if you like go down to like the eighth or ninth priority, maybe they start to differ. But yeah, it's going to be the same things, and to the extent that, I mean, this is, I think, something that Trump, I don't know whether like explicitly or not, he managed to kind of tap into, like he's kind of cracked the code to appealing to minority voters. And like, for years and years, Republican consultants were saying, if you want to appeal to Hispanic voters, you need to be like pro amnesty or whatever. Right. And it turns out, if you want to appeal to Hispanic voters, the thing to do is to be tough on crime, favorable, like good on the economy, and actually even like pro border security, right? So yeah, that's I think a problem is you over, like, you're thinking about, oh, we got to target this group, so you over isolate them on that identity characteristic when like they're just people, so they care about the same things as everybody else.
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, there's a theory for how marginalized and oppressed groups behave, that the left, gentry class educated liberals have, but marginalized and oppressed groups often don't think of themselves as marginalized and oppressed. They think of themselves as people.
Yeah.
People with bills to pay, and
Yeah, there's a second issue that the Democrats in particular have, which is like, if you survey people's policy views, right? Black voters, they have the same kind of views as everyone, but actually black Democrats are more moderate than white Democrats, right? Because they have these other issues, like that there is identity that is like pushing them that way. So
well, they also think the Republicans are a racist party because the
yeah.
1960s.
Well, yeah, there's some, the Republicans are racist, and then they to the extent that they're hooked into like black institutions, right? It's just I saw a clip. I think it was from the show Blackish. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Blackish, but there's a clip where one of the characters was talking to her grandmother, and she said, like, well, who are you going to vote for? And it's like, I'm going to vote for the Democrat. It's like, well, let's go through the issues, for where you stand. It's like, do you think we should build a border wall? And the grandmother's like, we don't have a border wall already? No wonder the immigrants are taking all our jobs. And then it's like, well, what do you think about, uh, Muslim immigration? It's like, well, I think that's a threat to the country. It's like, well, what do you think about the death penalty? I think, it should be celebrated, right? And at the end, the person's like, well, I put all this into the computer and it says you should vote for Trump. In fact, the computer thinks you might be Trump. And she's like, no. I'm a Democrat. I vote for the Democrat, right? So there is some of that going on, but the problem is, if you're a Democrat, if you're underperforming with that group, that's an issue, because you can't just like double down on your liberal policy issues, because a lot of the voters that you need, they don't really agree with you on the issues, right? So it's a tough,
But if you make the issues salient, it might reduce their enthusiasm.
Exactly. Yes. And actually, there was a Harvard scholar who was in the news a lot last year, who she had not done a lot of research papers, but one paper that she did do highlighted this fact that a lot of that the Democrat black support is overstated in comparison to where black voters are on policy, and some of that is lower engagement voters just don't have a good sense of where the parties are on policy. And so if you try and get people more engaged, you could actually lose support, right, among black voters for Democrats. That scholar, of course, is former president of Harvard, Claudine Gay, one of
Roxanne Gay's cousin.
Correct. Yes.
The magisterial Roxanne Gay.
Roxanne Gay. Yes. She's larger than life.
I mean, so this is, I'll say this is a general, we're talking about black voters, this is a general issue. And it's like almost like the political press is trying to give the Kamala Harris campaign, give the Harris-Walz campaign some pointers. I've seen Politico report multiple times where it's like, it's like Asian Americans are being targeted in the Atlanta area with Stop Asian Hate ads from the Harris campaign. But actually, they're concerned about inflation and jobs.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, no shit. I mean,
right.
Like, why are you like what are you thinking? It's like they're not thinking. It's like they're captured by consultants that have never interacted with real Asian Americans, or Latinx voters don't like to be called Latinx. The Harris campaign needs a rethink. I don't know. Just like there's weird things like that. I'm like, why are you writing this? This is obvious. If you just talk to any person, they will say that like this is weird. This is what let me one thing that's reminded me of the year 2000. Bill Bradley was running against Al Gore, insurgent, progressive, liberal campaign, and Michael Jordan was pro Bradley, but they waited until the last second to do the endorsement because there was worry within the Bradley campaign that white skin privilege and white racism would mean that they would lose support from the Jordan. And the Jordan, and so you're laughing, but at the time, pundits were like, "Yeah, this is retarded."
Right.
Like, I mean, it's like what kind of bubble are they that they don't understand that Michael Jordan, he might not have won, but the time to do that was early, and let it sink in, as opposed to like by the end when he was already losing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, let's pull out the Jordan advertisement." It turned out that Jordan had like filmed that months ago,
Right. Well, and particularly the idea that I mean, if that Michael Jordan of all people, the white people are going to look at that and be like, "Whoa, I don't know that I want to vote for a candidate that's endorsed by the basketball player whose poster I have up on my wall and who I spend like countless hours of my life rooting for on the television, beloved figure, right?"
Yeah. I mean, so part of this is like the detachment from like that gentry cultural elite, which does dictate a lot of things in academia and journalism from empirical reality. So I pointed this out on social media on X, and by the way, Noah Smith retweeted this. So Noah, the right, like a comet, he's like just like flashing towards the right. But he retweeted this, and I said, white Americans vote. Well, not the majority, but in places like Iowa, white Americans voted twice for Barack Hussein Obama. Actually, like if you break out Southern whites, Northern whites did support Obama, I think, So it's like if you disaggregate whites, which I don't like to normally do that sort of thing, like, oh, if you like subdivide it this way, blah blah blah. But Southern whites have voted traditionally different than Northern or non-Southern whites. That goes back to the beginning of the Republic, right? So that's an okay disaggregation. And people in Iowa, now at red state, they voted for Barack Hussein Obama, a black man, twice. And in return, the last half of the teens, white Americans were told that this is a white supremacist country and they need to have a racial reckoning. So I think that there's a lot of like detachment from reality where there's a far less racist country than it was. And you know what the equivalent of this is? It's like not part of our show notes. Well, I listened to Groypers talking about. So there's a thing some of you might like see it like on social media where this retarded Groyper is asking Vivek Ramaswamy, "Why are you hiding the fact that you're not a Christian?" You know. By the way, the name Ramaswamy, Rama. Okay, so first of all, it's in his name. Okay, like look at the guy. So you know, but this is like it's like a sort of like a lack of like attachment to the reality of the world that we have. So on the left, or on like and this is the left is more important because like they control the media and the journalists, in my opinion. You have this like, oh yeah, like we're a white supremacist country, even though the percentage of white people keeps decreasing. More and more people are mixed race. We elected Barack Hussein Obama. The Democrats nominate Kamala Harris. The Republican vice presidential candidate is married to a brown chick that's a Hindu. I mean, like, it makes no sense. Now, then you have the Groypers, and they're like, yeah, Thomas Jefferson was bad because he wasn't a Christian. And it's like, okay, it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, like I get what you're saying, but you do understand that the Republican Party is arguably far less sectarian than it was even 20 years ago. That the country is getting more secular, or like not. It's definitely not Christian the way you think of Christian, and yet like you're making like these like litmus tests. And the litmus test that's like, okay, you want like 30%, 25% of the vote, maybe 20% of the vote. It's just a total detachment from reality. It's LARPing, maybe it's like online social media stuff. But I've heard like I've read people say that it's really disturbing or it's positive, like how much energy on the right is from Groypers. If the energy on the right is from Groypers, we're fucked.
There's now, and in fact, I don't know if this is still happening, but for a while, Nick Fuentes was pro Kamala Harris. In fact, he was trying to get the Groypers to go canvass for her in like Michigan.
Yeah, you mean Nick Fuentes, but anyway.
Yeah, right, yes.
Well, I mean, there's a suspicion that he is controlled at this point because of like the law coming after him with his crypto money and other things. So
yeah, I mean, he was at the Capitol on January 6th, but yeah. So I mean, like, and Richard Spencer, another big guy. He canvassed for Biden back when Biden was in the race. David Duke is for Jill Stein, so he's unaffiliated or whatever. But so the Groypers, I don't think are a major force in American politics. I'll put it that way. But yeah, there is a kind of disconnect. It's hard to say, and in general, I think it's a little bit hard because there's clearly a realignment that's happening. The ground is shifting in not just one way, but in multiple ways. And so that can be a little disconcerting, and it's hard for people to understand because they're used to thinking about the political divisions in this country in one way, and it's not that, it's something else. I saw, for example, Silicon Valley for the last 20 years has been pretty overwhelmingly Democrat in their support. And there's still a lot of Democrat support in Silicon Valley, but this time it's a lot more acceptable to support Trump than it has been in the past. On the flip side, you have all sorts of people, Liz Cheney, Jeff Flake, Michael Medved, the talk show host, like old school kind of defense hawk.
Everybody at the Bulwark, like William Crystal.
Yeah.
Okay, like a lot of people, we have some younger listeners who don't remember, but William Crystal, he's a neocon, but he was like hardcore to being pro-life in the 1990s. I remember him always talking about it. Because I don't think his dad, Irving Crystal, was pro-life. He was like a neocon. He was like he was a neocon 0.2 where it was more like traditionally conservative. That was his whole spin.
Yeah. And he was like anti-gay rights and
the Weekly Standard published articles in the 1990s about the connection between homosexuality, like being gay, and pedophilia.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And they even like I remember this. I don't remember exactly when, but this was like after Obergefell, um, Bill Kristol was asked, well, are you gonna should the Republicans moderate their stance in opposition to same-sex marriage? And he was like, why? Why should they do that? It's because young people support same-sex marriage, young people are stupid. This is a paraphrase, but it's basically, so that was kind of his thing. So those people were never for Trump, but in the prior elections in 2016, 2020, they weren't for the Democrat, right? They didn't vote, or they wrote in Ronald Reagan, or they did something like that. This time, I think they're explicitly for Kamala. And I'm not sure, there's different ways you could think about that. They frame it in terms of, Trump being a threat to democracy or whatever. But another way to think about it is, before they thought Trump was a temporary phenomenon, and that after he left, the Republican Party would go back to the way it was before. And now they think, no, that this is a permanent realignment. And so, we got to.
Well, part of the issue is JD Vance, the vice president, is he is more Trump than Trump. I mean, he's more authentically populist on a lot of these economic issues, and on foreign policy, he's more authentically anti-interventionist than Trump is. Trump may be those things, but it's more of a gut instinct. It's not a well thought ideological opinion.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this stuff, JD is. And so if he's the heir, I would say of the potential heirs, Tom Cotton is the best hope for the old school, because Tom Cotton wants to kill everybody.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know, but it seems like he's ready to nuke Illinois.
Yeah, right. If
I don't know. You know what I'm saying, though? The belligerent side of that guy is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so then you have, yeah. No, go on. I
was just going to say, I mean, the thing about Tom Cotton that I think even distinguishes him, is he's very if you hear him talk about it, a lot of people who are kind of in that way, sometimes they're voluble or excitable or whatever, but he's very cold-blooded about it, but yeah.
Well, I mean, what were the voters of Arkansas thinking when they elected a reptilian to the Senate? I don't know, dude. I mean, I don't know why you gotta say he's cold-blooded. What's he supposed to be? Those people, as we say, right? I will say it's okay. It's a little weird. It's a little weird to see Dick Cheney endorsing Kamala Harris, and Kamala Harris accepting it in 2024, probably because we're old. We remember how much he was demonized by the left and the liberals.
Yeah.
And there's still some people Matt Stoller. I mean, I don't know if Stoller's MAGA, but he's definitely, he's a one-ish single-issue voter, anti-monopoly. And so he's generally got good relations with the Hawley staff, I know. They tried to convince him to become a Republican. He wasn't. But although, have you seen the Matt on Matt squabbles? The Battle of the Mats? Iglesias versus Stoller?
Yeah, well, and Burning, I think, was also, got into it. Yes, there's a lot of Matts.
Yeah. And then you have Chris on Chris, Rufo and Brunette, Yeah. It's these spats are interesting to just to see how they blow up. But I mean, it's, the anti-war, the people that came up in the anti-war movement that really propelled Obama in 2008, a lot of them, they'll go along with it, but a lot of them are just what is going on here? What did we march for? What did we oppose? And why is Kamala talking about, what is up with her strange new respect for Dick Cheney?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just it makes you think.
Yeah. I mean, Obama, he did do Libya and stayed in Afghanistan, and I think for all of his, he did withdraw from Iraq, although we had to go back to deal with ISIS later. But for all of his, dovish reputation going in, I don't know that his administration was all that different foreign policy wise from what it would have been with a normal Republican. McCain, okay, that's different, right? McCain, he's even past the Tom Cotton level in terms of hawkishness or whatever, or was, I should say. But yes, I mean,
Well, the issue is like Tom Cotton wants to bomb them back to the late Bronze Age. McCain wanted to bomb them back to the Stone Age.
okay,
Yeah. I guess like the last thing, like as we're like gonna move off the politics stuff for a little while, we're recording on the 18th of October. Obviously, well less than a month now until the election. Well, actually, a lot of the votes are already happening. Like let's set that aside.
Happening in many states. Yeah.
The prediction markets, it's about 50-50, but leading Trump now. The vibe is leading Trump. The Democrats are starting to get nervous. And also Kamala, the empty suit problem is starting to get like highlighted more and harder to cover up in terms of she doesn't really stand for anything. I mean, she does stand for sex changes for prisoners. Actually, she did in 2019, So it turns out agreeing to every crazy left-wing thing to try to get nominated in the Democratic Party primary in 2019 is not something that you could just shuck off just like anything in 2024. Like it's sticking to her. People think she's too liberal. And so she's, I love Dick Cheney. I will bomb the Browns, back to hell or wherever they're from. And she's trying to make moves that she's tough. She's probably going to put down special forces on the border, start to killing Guatemalan children who are trying to cross. I don't know what she's going to say to try to convince us. We don't believe it, but she's going to say whatever she needs to say.
It's a little late now, I would say. She's in a tough position, both because of those positions and then also, one of the things that could have been an advantage of swapping Biden for a new candidate. Like one is obviously you remove the age issue, but the other is you create the possibility for some distance between the new candidate and the Biden administration, which is not very popular. Obviously, having that candidate be Harris, who's the vice president, makes that harder. But she has been asked multiple times, is there anything that you would do differently than Biden? And the answer is basically no, right? That's what she said, right? So that's tough. I mean, that's a tough hand to have to play out. And yeah, it's very close. The prediction markets, I think now are more like 60-40 Trump. They moved in his direction, but there's a lot of noise in prediction markets. So you don't want to put too much stock in that, really. There's a lot of variables, but I think it's safe to say that the Harris campaign is acting like they think that they are behind, and the Trump campaign is not. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't know. I mean, what else to say? I mean, I think that's all correct, and we'll see. The turnout, and I don't know. October surprise. There hasn't been an October surprise or anything like that. Trump has kind of been Trump, but one thing, he is a little lower energy than he used to be. That's actually good in a way because he says fewer outrageous things because he just has like less bandwidth to say them. So I don't know. We'll see. Let's move on to something different before we hit to the paywall and the sailor talk. So I have been mostly listening to The Falcon's Children, which is a serialized fantasy novel by our mutual friend Ross Douthat. And so falconschildren.com, the Substack, The Falcon's Children. And he's on chapter 2, Country Girl, the Country Girl. No, it's not a bro country song, but girl, you thought I was a wizard. I just want you to get up in my magical truck. But
there is
yeah.
AI, they can do amazing things now.
Oh, okay. Okay, so they just did the guy who did the Redneck Fellowship of the Ring, which was really good. He just came out with um, A Song of Rednecks, Game of Thrones, and actually, Sri, talking to our editor here, just like breaking the fourth wall. Put in a little bit of an interstitial for like maybe like 15 seconds of A Song of Rednecks, which is like Game of Thrones, with the rednecks.
Down in Wester Hollow where the country folk plotting, it's king of the porch, but his seat's getting hot. John's the half-son, his roots kinda cross. Santa's dreaming of a man whose teeth ain't all lost. Arya's in the yard swinging knives at a tree, and Bran's rolling round since he fell from that old TV.
And this one, by the way, the editor of this AI enterprise, I will definitely say it's a straight man. Just I'm just saying. Just like the ladies are like, what the fuck is this? You know what I'm trying to say? Because like these redneck guys, they're looking really redneck,
Right.
with the teeth and the hair and the paunch, and then like, look. If I'm seeing girls like this at the trailer park, like, you know what I'm trying to say? I'm just like, wow. Like, there's one way out of the trailer park. It's make sure you got a hot daughter, I guess. I don't know. But back to Ross Douthat, The Falcon's Children. I've been listening to it. It's pretty good. I like it. I encourage you guys to subscribe. So I'm going to be honest. One reason I subscribed is I know Ross a little bit, and he has the novel written. He's still, I think, doing some revisions. I can like harass him if it's not coming out on time. I asked him for a map, and he posted the map. And so like I do like having like after the George R. R. Martin debacle, which like I started reading George R. R. Martin in January of 1999. That's 25 years ago. And I don't think we're going to see the end of it. I think everyone assumes that. Well, we'll see. He's pretty old. Let me just double check. I think he's not in his 80s yet. Like, I think he's in his 70s.
Now,
and,
I don't want to discourage
76.
Yeah. But my understanding is Ross, while he has the first novel completed, it's only the first of a series. So if it does well, it's possible he could go the George R. R. Martin or Robert Jordan route and just never.
No, if it does well, that will motivate him to write the later ones. So like, fucking subscribe, But I guess I want to like ask you. Okay, so one thing that we realized in one of these conversations we're in on the internet, I'm not going to say what the word is, but like I like need these maps in these fantasy novels. It turns out that some people don't need the maps and they don't even look at the map, and I'm just like, what? You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I mean, like that's like saying, let's go to Dallas, and like you're just like, oh yeah, just go north, just follow the sun, you just go north, you'll hit Dallas. Right. And if you go past Dallas, just double back. Like, no, just like, get the map out, you go to Dallas, and that's how it works out. So you got to have the map, and like as you're going along with this fantasy. I think like most fantasy writers or readers of fantasy and science fiction of these genre at some point want to be. Actually, most people who are like deep readers of fiction probably want to be a writer. Very few can be, very few are, and of those who are, very few actually make a living at it. Ross tried to sell it to a publisher. Like his agent tried, and like Ross Douthat obviously has written a bunch of books actually. So he has traction, nonfiction books. Autobiographical, like, semi-autobiographical, sometimes like political, whatever, cultural, religion. So, but he couldn't get it sold. So, he's posting it, serializing it. But you are one of those people that does not read this genre at all. And like, can I just ask you why? Like, let's talk about what's wrong with you. And it's not like, it's not like a therapy set. It's not like,
okay. So, and I used to think when I was growing up, because I do read a lot of science fiction, right? And I think for a lot of people, those go together, sci-fi, fantasy, they're in the same section in the bookstores often. And it is the case that when I was growing up, we were not allowed to read anything that had magic in it or sorcery or that sort of stuff, mostly. Narnia was okay because it was like an explicitly Christian thing or whatever. But other stuff, I even remember.
White. It's explicitly white magic.
It's right. Yeah, right. I think there was a show like Thundercats or something.
Yeah.
80s cartoon, and there was always
Yeah.
there was
Lionel.
yeah. So there was one that was like Silverhawks, which was like a space show, and then that came on at like 3 p.m, and at 3:30, Thundercats came on, and we had to turn off the TV. We could watch Silverhawks, but we couldn't watch Thundercats because it had something to do with like supernatural forces or whatever. I don't know. So you could say, well, maybe that's the reason, but I don't think, as I think about it, I don't really think that had a long-term effect. My brother went through the same thing. I think he read like Robert Jordan and other stuff and other restrictions that we had as kids. They didn't last. There's just something about fantasy, the vibe, it just doesn't appeal to me. There's like an element of, so like Falcor the Wise has to travel up Mount Karazhan sword of the bagged people to save the Princess Alawir, right? And it's just like, okay.
No, that's exactly what happens.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I started because I subscribe. I've read a bunch of Ross's books, and I'm a Ross fan. I support him. So I'm subscribed to the Substack. I started the audio of the prologue of Falcon's Children. And at first it's like, okay, there's a woman, she's had like a bunch of stillbirths or whatever, right? And then like after 3 or 4 paragraphs, they start getting on, she's like going on a boat somewhere. And I'm like, I just can't get into it, So I'm not a hater. If other people, I've never even read Tolkien. All right. I'm a Catholic guy. So in a lot of circles, like people are like, what? How is that even possible? I saw the like Lord of the Rings movies or whatever. But yeah, it's just not for me. I'm not a hater. I'm not going to make fun of other people necessarily for liking that stuff, but my wife likes it, but I just don't, I can't get into it. I can't get into it, even if, yeah. So that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I don't read too much fiction anymore, actually, in general. I just don't have time. And I actually didn't start reading anything I didn't start reading fiction until like just for myself. Because like I'm a big reader, but I would read only nonfiction until I was 13.
Yeah.
Then I started reading some science fiction. I didn't read fantasy until like later after science fiction, and I think it's because I'm a STEM oriented person, and so
Right.
I read like Asimov and stuff like that first, Arthur C. Clarke, whatever. And I mean, it's a spectrum, fantasy and science fiction, because on the one hand you have like Mugador on his cliff with his like hood, casting a spell, and then on the other end you have like, oh, I don't know, like miniature robots going through a wormhole. Okay, like that's a totally different feeling, right? But then you have like space opera, like the stuff in Star Wars, and I'm not a big fan of Star Wars and stuff like that, but that's space fantasy, or science fantasy or something. Yeah, where it's like, it's basically like, okay, well, Luke is, he's like the boy hero. He's like Randolph Thor, or like, in Robert Jordan, or he is kind of the equivalent of Frodo,
Mm-hmm.
And like Lucas has been pretty. Lucas copied from the Lensman. He copied from the Lensman and Dune a lot, and then obviously just like standard like fantasy tropes. It's in space, right? I think a lot of fantasy can be pretty formulaic, actually, and so I think that's one reason people are like, okay, like, you're not in it for the characterization. A lot of it is written, not all of it, but a lot of it is written to basically 13-year-old 12 to 13-year-old boys,
Right.
Like so like there's an acknowledgement of sexuality in a lot of fantasy. Like Tolkien is the exception here because like there's just like barely any women in it.
Right.
But it's never explicit, and relationships are not like the dominant theme.
Right.
Yeah. It's like it's always like a lot of like adventures and all that stuff. When you have like more adult fantasy, I guess like that's a little like George R. R. Martin is like, okay, that's George R. R. Martin was like, okay, I'm just do like +10 on the age,
Right. Yeah.
And I've said this before. Some of the stuff depicted on the Game of Thrones show was sanitized.
Right.
Right, believe it or not.
Like,
so
hey, what about like, Okay, child rape. What if it's his sister that he's raping as a child or something? Just
So the part of the issue is the Ramsey Bolton character, which people found like incredibly psychopathic, was much more disgusting in the book, believe it or not.
Yeah.
To the point where I was like, what is going on here? Because like this just is not real, and I don't really need to know some of this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's like called grimdark. That's like, pushing it. Then you have like other like Brandon Sanderson's a Mormon. You can imagine what his books are like. So you have like certain typologies, certain formulas, and the whole idea is, I think, like, adolescent boys identify with these like hero motifs,
Sure.
and it's a little more relatable. So George R. R. Martin has said explicitly that fantasy is more of the speculative fiction genre, the science fiction to fantasy, and science fiction itself goes from like hard science fiction to space opera and stuff like that, right? Or near future science fiction or far future. There's all these genres. Well, science fiction, he said, was the genre of his youth, of the space age. But the space age kind of ended in the 70s, early 70s, with the end of Apollo. And 80s, 90s, like early 21st century, space was there, but space was not exciting to the general public. So we had Galileo mission, we had space shuttles, there was all these, we had a space station, we had stuff going on, but that was like if you're an expert, if you're an engineer, if you're a space nut. But it was not a general public thing. So people moved back to fantasy, which is, just like mythic. I mean, the Iliad is like fantasy.
It's mythic past. Yeah. So it's like
as opposed to as opposed to literary fiction, which is like psychological complexity. I mean, it's basically like fiction geared towards the female brain. So, and I think that's like the dominant elite form. I think what might be happening is, you were talking about SpaceX, you were talking about Starship.
Yeah.
I think as we record right now, I think we might be at an inflection point where Elon Musk himself, through force of personality, might be able to make science fiction cool again. He might be able to make the future cool again. Because the issue is, like, if you had asked somebody in 1968, if you had asked them to predict which planets our species like would have landed on or gone to by 2024,
right? Yeah. Well, yeah, 2000
right?
movie, they're in Jupiter. It's like manned missions to Jupiter and Saturn, depending on whether you're talking about the book or the movie.
So that was 50. That was 56 years ago.
And they have,
I guess, like, no, 55.
Yeah. And they have, like, I mean, there's a space station, but it's like really big and cool, and they're doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, their internet was shitty, but still, so it's like we haven't like expanded in the physical universe. This is one of Peter Thiel's claims. Apollo was extremely expensive, actually, on a per unit basis, and the economics don't really work out. So it's more of like do we have a spiritual vision outward? Fantasy doesn't require that sort of spiritual vision. Fantasy, I think, leverages kind of like the motifs that we already have in our culture. Now, one of the problems with a lot of fantasy, though, is today, I don't know if Brandon Sanderson does this a little bit, but it's like, like Tolkien's fantasy. This was a thing that people are bringing this up in social media. It's totally true. The hobbits are the substitute for the modern mind, which is actually early 20th century British people, English people.
Right. Yep.
Right. And so, but everybody else were not like totally relatable. And so if you wrote, so for example, Bernard Cornwell, who writes a lot like the Saxon stories, and he wrote like Sharp's Rifles. He writes all these adventure stories. He wrote a 3-part historical fantasy, Arthurian fantasy, that was very realistic and not really any magic. It was set in like 500 AD Britain, and it was really realistic.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, it's kind of a brutal book, and it's really hard to relate to because he basically uses the mentality of those people and their perspectives. So it's like Norseman, the movie. That movie, a lot of people pointed out, like, its morality was a pagan morality, and people were like, what the hell? you know? And so a lot of the problems that you have with fantasy and why I think a lot of people are like, what's the point of this is a lot of modern fantasy is like, smart aleck. It's like it's like a Marvel movie except in the Middle Ages,
Yeah.
And like there's like
Fantasy
same
with like a female queen, and like there's a black Viking there for some reason.
Yeah. There's it's like what we see, I guess, in the Lord of the Rings of Power, the TV show is like the worst aspect where it's like, there's like an Asian elf, I think there's gay character. I think like I think there is like a hint of
No
queer
idea.
characters. Yeah, which is good for you. This is good. This is good that you don't know, So no, so I mean, obviously Ross, going back to Ross the Falcon's Children, he's aware of all this, so we'll see. And like I'm excited to give him constructive criticism along the way, as he is a creator, because he knows all the arguments, and like he's at an age where like maybe he's tired of this opinion journalism thing, and maybe like
Right,
the second half of his career will be as a fantasy author. You know what I'm saying? Actually, Frank Herbert was a journalist, the creator of Dune, and then he became a science fiction writer, a fantasy author. Most people can't make a living off it, so it doesn't, but it's definitely winner take all. The ones that make a lot of money make a lot because they get like reprints forever. And so we'll see. I mean, hopefully Ross is one of those. I think we should like go to the paywall topic now. We've been talking for a little while. So I guess the paywall topic is there was an article in Unheard. Is it the Return of Sailor? Is it Unheard?
Something about the mainstream.
Is Steve Saylor re-entering the mainstream conservatism? So, okay, who is Steve Saylor? For those of you who don't know, hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to khanversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they'd long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' right. In civil discourse we can find the ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. As dawn broke soft on dewy grass, they smiled and and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see the shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand